People come in because they have to, because the human safety is involved. So they come in and they see the giant snake in the aquarium tank, and they're like, well, geez, that's something I don't normally see. Maybe I should call animal control. Maybe I should call police. So that's what they do. You have an extra layer of stuff happening that didn't need to happen. And, it always tends to make the paper, even if the animal's perfectly legal. Now, nobody can help a house fire, obviously. Drug busts. Easy to avoid. Don't do drugs. I mean, and this is usually the people, if you're going to have drugs and you're going to have a drug bust, you're also keeping illegal animals. Both those things, police love to hold up the illegal whatever, in the pile of cocaine or whatever it is. And this just, it puts all of us in a bad light. Everybody thinks we're just crazy people. Domestic disturbance, this has to do with my fourth one actually. Domestic disturbances. You beat your wife, you beat your husband, you beat your kids, somebody calls police come, they see the big snake in the aquarium tank. Wow, that's something I don't normally see every day. The fourth one, you get ratted out. I'm going to talk about a specific instance that we took care of down in Connecticut. I'm not going to mention the person's name, but he is a vendor at our Mass Reptile Expos, and he's a great guy. He had a girlfriend, was living with him, they broke up, he threw her out. No abuse involved, anything like that. But she got mad, called up the town where he lived and said that he was keeping his animals in filthy conditions and everything smelled and that there were rodents running around. And he got in touch with the society, and he said, I need your help. And sometimes people deserve to get busted, and sometimes they don't. So whenever you walk into a situation like this, because this is what I do for the society for the most part, is I help people either get permits for things, or I try and defend them if possible, if things happen. So I was a little hesitant, but I'm like, you know what, let's meet with him. And I went down, and he had the most immaculate snake collection I'd ever seen in my entire life. And that includes my own. And his mouse colony, his rat colony, they were perfect, perfectly cared for, perfectly constructed cages, everything. So I asked him what was up, and he told me. He says, well, I threw my girlfriend out, and she made a bunch of phone calls, and now I've got the health department knocking on my door, I've got ACOs knocking on my door, I let them in, they saw everything, they don't have a problem, but the zoning committee learned that he was breeding 300 ball pythons and some boas, and they wanted him to be zoned for business. That was the issue, and that they'd never zoned a business for a snake breeding operation before. So that was the other issue. So we met, I think it was at 4 or 5 in the afternoon down there in Connecticut. There was a bunch of us that went. Were you there, Dawn?
I wasn't.
I'm trying to think. I don't think anybody in this room was there.
I couldn't go. I remember you called me about that.
Yeah. But I remember who was there, and we went in, and basically these people, and it's not that unusual of a circumstance. These people just wanted to be educated, and they wanted to know, what's the deal here. Everybody had, we're talking about snakes, so everybody is freaking out. And it was interesting because people had all kinds of questions. What if they get out? Well, it's a ball python. If it gets out, it won't survive the winter. They're small. I think somebody might have brought. No, nobody brought any snakes because I think all the council members, the zoning board members, had already seen Randy's collection and knew, they didn't have an issue. Most of them didn't anyway. There was one guy, and I'll get to him. But they didn't really have an issue. They just wanted some education about it, and they were going to vote to allow him to buy a permit. I think it was on a 2-year basis for $200 to be able to run this breeding operation out of his house. So we were there to allay their fears about what happens if it gets out. Can they coil around a baby's neck? All kinds of crazy questions were fielded to us, and we answered them one by one. And there were questions about the mouse colony. What happens if a mouse gets out? And I described the differences between wild mice and domestic mice, and how when domestic mice get out, they just hang around the containers because that's all they've known. Wild mice they leave, they take off. No one's breeding wild mice. They're full of parasites, diseases, pesticides. So we explained that away. And there was one guy, I think he was in his 70s, 80s, but he had something to say that was negative about everything. And the guy who ran the committee, the panel, would always have to tell him to stop talking and let this person finish, let this committee member finish, let this person in the audience finish. And so at the end of it, they came around, and he was the only negative vote. He was the only vote against it. And I can remember, and I remember sitting there looking at him all day long and thinking, this is the guy, I know I'm going to hear this from him, because I've fought people like him 40 years. And at the end of it all, when the vote, just before the vote came down, and everything nobody got angry at him, nobody yelled at him or anything, but at the end of it, he just balled up his fist and he said, we just can't have these snakes here. And I just never forgot that. I never forgot that moment. And we left, and the fellow we're talking about had a lawyer. But the lawyer was just going by the law. He didn't know anything about snakes, which is why we were there. But we won that, and that's on the Reptile Expo Facebook page if everyone wants to see it. But it was quite something because it set a precedent that says, yes, you can keep 300 ball pythons. You can run a ball python breeding business in this particular place in Connecticut. And if this issue comes up again in Connecticut or in Massachusetts or in Rhode Island or in Maine or in Kentucky, they can point to that precedent and say, hey, this town council, this zoning board said it's okay. You know, so it's already been done. You know, well, how come they said it's okay? And you guys are saying it, you know, so they can use that to their advantage in the future, which is kind of nice. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about the Fourth Amendment. I have another handout. This is the end, trust me. Good. One more handout.
Yeah.
Anybody know what the Fourth Amendment is? This is another way people get in trouble with their animals. Because we're nice people, basically. Fourth Amendment is in place to protect the innocent, not the guilty.
Illegal search and seizure.
That's correct. Right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things. What it means is that if any agent of the state, county, federal, town, city government, with any kind of an enforcement capacity comes knocking on your door of your home, you do not have to allow them to enter. You can say, I do not permit a search of my place or my person. You may not enter. Make them get a search warrant. Search warrants are not easy to get. You have to file out a detailed affidavit stating exactly what they expect to find. And snakes is not you can't. It has to be specific. Now everybody says when, you know, and I've fielded a lot of things like this about, you know, the EPO or the wildlife officer, he just wanted to see my collection. He asked real nice. Don't allow people into your home, you know, and again, you don't have to be keeping anything illegal. And it doesn't have to be about the collection. It's about whatever else they may see in plain sight. I do not consent to search of my premises or my person. You may not enter. There are 4 reasons that a law enforcement officer, and it's always law enforcement that does this, it's never like the county clerk or anything like that. There's 4 reasons that under the Fourth Amendment, they can enter your dwelling. The first is with a search warrant. Must be exactly specific to what they expect to find inside the premises. Not easy to get, detailed affidavit must be filled out. The second is, I talked about this earlier, exigent circumstances. Everybody remembers the marathon bombing and what happened in Watertown. Now, that was exigent circumstances when those men, those law enforcement people, were allowed to enter homes carrying M4s and search room to room because they were looking for a dangerous person. They had an idea of where he was, and they did ask. They didn't just barge into homes. Can we search your home? Can we look for this guy? Do you know if anyone's in your house? A lot of homes they didn't even enter, but some they did. So that's an example of exigent circumstances. In other words, if a wife's being beaten in the home, police officers can hear this, they know what's happening, they've already got the 911 call, they can break in and they can, because somebody's in danger. Somebody might be has already been put in danger, or somebody is currently in danger. That's exigent circumstances. Administrative warrant. This applies to apartments. It really doesn't apply to houses. But it states that a landlord can get an administrative warrant to inspect whatever they need to control inside your apartment, like a water heater, building codes, stuff like that. It just gives them the right to come in and go directly to whatever they need to do and fix it, deal with it, replace it, whatever. Fourth reason. This is key, and this is how all these problems originate. They can be invited in by anyone who is able to open the door. That includes someone as young as Maddie right there. Yeah. Teach your kids, put a little sign on your door. Do not allow anyone into your house. I'm a big fan of law enforcement. I love cops. A lot of my friends are cops.